What's up guys? In this video, you're going to learn the importance of putting in the reps and staying consistent to achieve your poker goals. Now every week I jump on a group coaching call with my poker athletes, and the first part of the conversation is always around what's been going well, where have you been having success, and very often the areas that players are happy with, that are going well, they've been very consistent. Whether that's with their grinding, whether it's their meditation habits, whether it's exercise, whether it's their studying, they're generally happy and making progress in the areas they've been consistent in. All right, they put a lot of repetition and hours into those activities. On the flip side, we then steer the conversation where you run into problems. What's not working out right now? Where do you feel like you can improve? Very often, it comes down to, wasn't consistent enough in that area. Didn't put enough time into studying. Haven't been going to the gym as much as I usually do. Haven't been doing my grinding hours or hit my target that I wanted to. All right, and it always reinforces to me the importance of staying consistent over long periods of time with the variables that matter most. All right, and it's amazing if you look at high stakes performers in any avenue, whether it's poker, whether it's sports, whether it's business. It's the people who've been consistent for the longest, who put in the most reps over the longest time periods, and the quality of each rep they put in has been a good level. All right, so today we're going to discuss how to have a practical system of putting in more repetition to the meaningful areas around poker, how you can start to track that so that you're progressing in a kind of progressive overload manner, and you over time you can put in more reps to the things that matter and be more consistent to get the outcomes that you want. All right, and if we could just think about our lives in terms of where they need to be more consistent, where they need to put more reps, life becomes a very winnable game. All right. Now, my own experiences with this, first of all, came from my days as a runner. I used to do middle distance running from the age of 12 to 23, I think was the last time I competed. And basically over the winter months was all about building our endurance. And this involved doing lots of long runs and getting lots of mileage in. That's what runners call it, getting in your miles. And basically on a weekly basis, I was trying to get in around 50 to 60 miles a week. Most weeks, obviously depends what age group I was in during those times. It scaled up as I got fitter. But generally, getting in miles, that was what it was about. And the more consistent I could be with getting in my miles, so to speak, obviously it was different training around that, but the miles was the main one during the winter, the better I would run in the summer. All right, so getting in miles, getting in repetitions was the most important variable. Now, when it comes to racing, who are the people who would beat me in a race? Almost always, it was the guys who were more consistent with their training, trained slightly harder, but often they'd put in more miles. It was the guys who were putting in 70-mile weeks and 80-mile weeks when I was putting in 50. All right, and I could quickly see the guys who were training harder than me, putting in more work, just more dedicated to running overall, were the guys on race day who were the guys who were ahead of me. On the flip side, the guys who were doing less miles than me, they were the guys who I was looking at my shoulder, and those are the guys behind. All right, so I could see the effort and the amount I was putting in was not directly correlated because there's other variables, but the repetition hours I put into running had a big kind of impact on performance overall. My next experience was with poker, and when I started doing Supernova Elite volume. I did Supernova Elite 3 years in a row, so I got pretty experienced of what it was like. But the first year was very unknown, and basically the way it worked was you had to do a certain amount of VPPs, it was called, and you had to basically play a certain amount of games and hands to get a certain amount of points for playing. All right, so in terms of a year, you broke your year down into how many games do I need to play? For me, I was playing heads up, sitting goes. If it was a cash game, it'd be how many hands you're playing, and then how many hours do I need to put in to get those hands and games in. And for me, when I broke it down based on the stakes I was playing, it required 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 50 weeks of the year. All right, so that was like 3,000 hours of the year. Now, on one element, that was challenging. It's like, wow, that's a lot. But on the same side, it was like, okay, put in the reps. Can you show up? Can you put in the hours day after day after day? And although it wasn't my kind of peak performance years at poker, so to speak, because I was pushing the volume very hard, it was a very easy game of putting the reps. Can you put in the reps over and over? And if I could, the reward was very clear. The kind of Supernova Elite chase was a very kind of linear one, and putting the reps would get me to that outcome. All right, so this really enforced the kind of notion of putting in kind of repetition and hours into your craft to get a desired outcome. Now, who would get to Supernova Elite quicker than me? The guys who put in more hours or they played higher. All right, so some guys would do 2x Supernova Elite or 3x Supernova Elite. There's some guys who did crazy volume and high stakes, and those guys simply put in more volume and more hours or higher stakes. All right, so that was the second kind of life experience. And my most recent one with kind of putting in reps is the most kind of direct correlation. And the last 12 months in particular, I've started doing powerlifting training. All right, so I do squats, deadlift, and bench press. And over the course of training these for a whole year, I've added 100 kilos to my weight, the weight I can lift for all three of those combined. So say it's 40 kilograms for a deadlift, 40 kilograms to my squat, and 20 kilograms to my bench, right? Not get too specific with the numbers. But the main thing is I've got stronger at those things by training them very specifically. Now, it's funny because some people in the gym might will come up to me occasionally and go, wow, how did you get so strong? How did you get strong at these exercises? And I want to scratch my head and just be like, well, how do you think? Like, I've trained for this very specifically for a period of time, and I've put a lot of repetition, and therefore I've got stronger. I just actually looked at my logbook before I did this video, and I basically for the last year I've tracked every kind of session I've done and all the reps and all the ranges, and in the last 12 months alone, I've done 3,000 squat reps. I've done over 4,000 bench presses, and I've done over 2,000 deadlift reps. All right, so that's quite a lot of repetition, and it'd be unreasonable to not get stronger by doing that much training, all right? Especially when it's in a programmed way, it's in a kind of progressive overload model, targeted towards improving strength. It'd be quite unreasonable to do that much output and to not get stronger, all right? Again, when it comes to who's strong and me in the gym, it's the guys who lift heavier, do more reps consistently, and they've been doing it for longer. The guys who've been doing it for 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, when I've only been doing it for 1 year. All right, so it becomes very simple when you think about how much effort and consistency are you putting into the areas that matter. All right, so if consistency is the key, the goal now is to go, how can I be more consistent in the areas that matter most? So, as a poker player, there's not many variables. All right, if we look at your success as a poker player, it's going to come down to 3 things. All right, it's going to come down to the amount of hours you put into studying and improving your game. It's going to come down to the amount of hours you put into grinding and playing poker. And it's going to come down to the quality of those hours, the quality of your grinding hours and the quality of your studying hours. All right, think about it. There's not much else. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go around performance, so you can play your best poker. There's a lot of things that go around studying, and obviously performance playing is very variable. But that's what it comes down to. How many hours did you put into grinding? How many hours studying? And what was the quality of those hours? So if that's the case, then all you need to do is start thinking about, how do I improve my output in each of those areas? All right, so this is when it comes down to the concept of working your numbers. All right, and working your numbers means understanding what your current output is for that area, what the current amount of time allocation in this analogy is, and then how can you improve that number over time, over weeks, months, and years. All right, so let's start with studying. Studying is the way you get better at poker, the way your game's improving, and in a year's time, your game in a few years' time will be almost directly related to the way you studied, all right, the way you worked on your game away from the tables. So to get your current baseline for studying, you need to ask yourself, how many hours have I put into studying in the past week? How many hours have I put into studying in the last month? And how many hours have I put into studying in the last year? If I ask most poker players that, they will start scratching their heads. They'll try to remember this week and go, maybe 4 hours this week. And I go, how many hours this month? They'll be like, oh, wow, you're really asking a tough question now. And as soon as I ask for the year, they're like, I don't know. I'm just guessing completely. All right, so most players don't even know. All right, so the first thing is, can you start to track this? Can you track, going forward, how many hours you're putting into studying on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis? All right, so at the end of a year, let's say we get to the end of 2023, and I go, how many hours did you put into studying? You go, wait a second, Adam, let me just check my spreadsheet. Oh, I put in 300 hours. You would know because you're tracking it. And when we track things and we work on a kind of a metric kind of basis, trying to improve a number, all of a sudden we can put way more effort into something because we see where we're coming short and we see what we're working towards. All right, so first step, get your baselines for studying. Also for grinding. How many hours did you grind this week? How many hours did you grind this last month? How many hours did you grind this last year? Again, you should know this. You should know the outputs that you're getting from the main variables that matter. And the final one would be, what was the quality of those hours? All right, what was the quality of each study hour and each grinding hour? So in terms of a system, you would track grinding hours that day, study hours each day, and what was the performance for each of them. All right, so when you were grinding, rate your performance out of 10. Was it a 10? Was it a 5 or 6? Give yourself a rough score out of 10. If you do this on a regular basis, you get an average score for the week, and you could easily tally that up to a month and a year, and you know roughly how well you think you're performing in that activity. For your studying could be how efficient and effective was the studying I did. I know for a lot of players, they have good intentions to do a certain topic on a study, but then they'll just get sidetracked. They'll end up watching videos or doing things that they didn't plan on doing. And those, in all honesty, those study sessions should be scored lowly. All right, if you're doing that often, you're not progressing in the way you could. All right, but in simple terms, it comes down to breaking poker down into trackable measures of grinding hours, study hours, and the quality of those hours, and then working those numbers. So your output for 2023, let's say you did this and you took my advice and you created a kind of scoring system for yourself. The first thing is to get those numbers kind of clear, and then over time improve those. All right, let's say on a weekly basis you're tracking your grinding hours and your study hours and how you're performing in them. The next goal at the end of the next week would be, okay, am I happy with the output from the previous week? If yes, awesome, double down, repeat that week again. If not, go, no, actually, I only did 10 hours of grinding and I want to be 15 hours. All right, cool. Next week, 15 hours is the target. How can you improve your systems around grinding so that 15 hours becomes the thing? All right, and that's it. It's about how many hours can I put in and how can I stay more consistent over time? And the goal is to increase these numbers, right? The same way like I approach the gym, I'm increasing the numbers over time and putting more and more repetitions so that the metrics of strength, and for you guys, the metrics of poker performance will get better and better. Now, doing the reps is repetitive, but it should never be mindless, all right? It should always have your full attention and your full engagement. All right, there's a rule called the 10,000 hour rule, which in simple terms applies to mastery of a skill or a craft. And the main kind of takeaway is that it takes roughly, it's very rough kind of guesstimates, 10,000 hours to fully master a craft, whether it's a sport or it's poker or it's playing an instrument. However, one of the key variables around that is the practice, the hours put in, have to be deliberate. Deliberate practice, which means highly focused, deep work. All right, so when you're putting repetition in, whether it's grinding or studying, the quality of those hours really matters. You've got to be fully intentional, fully engaged, and squeeze every bit of effort and performance out of the hours you're putting in. All right, but the main takeaway I want you to walk away from this video with is learning to put in more reps and be more consistent in the areas that matter most. There isn't many of them. Learn to track them. Know your current level and your current output and reps, so to speak, of each variable. Track it for a time and improve that number. If you're putting more hours of grinding this year than last year, more hours of studying, and the quality of those hours is better, there's a very good chance your performance is going to be a lot better at the poker tables. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Smash that like button before you go. There's going to be plenty more coming from me very soon.